History books don't always tell the truth. So who was Christopher Columbus? A brave explorer? A hero who discovered the world? But what if I told you that much of what you know about him is actually wrong? Here are 10 shocking facts about Columbus that will surprise you, and maybe even make you a little angry. Fact 1. The sea-loving boy. Columbus Christopher Columbus was born in 1451 in Genoa, Italy, to a poor wool weaver's family. From a young age, his heart belonged to the sea. He would often listen to sailors' stories in the harbor and let the sound of waves fill his dreams. They say the ocean was calling him, and he answered. Even as a child, Columbus would draw imaginary sea routes on the sand, play with old maps, and stare into the horizon for hours. His dream was never small. He wanted to change the map of the world, and one day that little boy actually did it. He used to whisper to himself, "One day I will see the other side of the world." Fact 2. The self-taught scholar. How Columbus educated himself. Columbus didn't grow up surrounded by books or in rich libraries. His classroom was the open sea, and his teachers were the winds, stars, and old sailors. He never attended a proper school or university. Yet that didn't stop him. He taught himself geography, astronomy, and navigation. At night, he would study old maps by candlelight and spend hours talking to sailors, soaking in their knowledge. One book in particular inspired him deeply: the travel writings of Marco Polo. After reading about the riches of Asia, he became convinced there had to be a quicker way to get there: by sailing west. Most scientists of his time laughed at him and called his ideas foolish. But Columbus believed the world was smaller than they thought, and that belief became his obsession. He proved that you don't always need books or degrees to change the world. Sometimes all you need is courage, curiosity, and a map that no one else dares to follow. Fact 3. Columbus was heading to India, but history had other plans. Columbus didn't set out to discover America. His true dream was to reach India. Yes, you heard that right. He wanted to find a direct sea route to Asia, the land of spices and gold. At the time, the land routes between Europe and Asia were either extremely dangerous or controlled by powerful Muslim empires. Columbus believed that if the earth was round, then by sailing west, one could eventually reach the east. In other words, India. But there was a major flaw in his plan. He had miscalculated the size of the earth and had no idea that an entire continent stood in his way. And so in 1492, he sailed west and accidentally landed on the shores of what would later be known as the Americas. The most ironic part? Columbus went to his grave thinking he had reached Asia. He called the islands he found the Indies, and the people living there, Indians. A mistake that still affects the terminology we use today. He was searching for Asia, but what he found was a whole new world, and history would never be the same again. Fact 4. For 7 years, he knocked on doors, and everyone said no. Imagine having a huge dream, but no money to make it happen. That was Columbus's struggle. He had mapped out a daring plan to reach India by sailing west, but he needed ships, crew, and supplies. To get those, he had to convince a king or queen to fund his voyage. For 7 long years, he wandered from court to court across Europe, Portugal, England, even France, pleading his case, but no one believed in him. They laughed at his idea, called it dangerous, and some even thought he was mad. But Columbus didn't give up. At last, the Spanish monarchs, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, decided to take a chance on him. At first, they were hesitant, but eventually, perhaps simply because they had no better options, they said yes. That one decision changed not just Columbus's fate, but the fate of the entire world. He was rejected again and again, but it only took one yes to write history. Fact 5. He stepped ashore and thought he had found paradise. When Columbus first set foot on American soil in 1492, he was overwhelmed by what he saw. After a long and terrifying journey across the ocean, the lush landscapes, crystal clear waters, exotic birds, dense forests, and unfamiliar native peoples felt like something from another world. This place looked nothing like Europe. Columbus described it with awe, writing that, "The nature here is so beautiful, it must be paradise." He even noted that the native people he encountered were peaceful, kind, and welcoming. But that feeling of wonder didn't last long, because Columbus wasn't just an explorer, he was also a treasure hunter. He had one thing on his mind: gold. And that obsession would soon turn this paradise into something much darker. Fact 6. Until the day he died, he believed he had reached Asia. It sounds unbelievable today, but Columbus never knew he had discovered a new continent. He crossed the Atlantic 4 times, exploring what we now call the Americas. But through it all, he remained convinced that he had landed somewhere along the eastern edges of Asia, maybe near China, India, or nearby islands. Meanwhile, some of his contemporaries, scientists and sailors, had started to suspect the truth. This might not be Asia at all, but an entirely new land. Some even publicly suggested the idea of a new continent. Still, Columbus refused to believe it. Even after his death, his journals continued to describe these lands as part of the Indies. Imagine that. You change the course of world history, you redraw the maps of the earth, and yet you never understand the true meaning of what you've done. He sailed to America 4 times, but died thinking he was in Asia. Fact 7. Columbus wasn't a scientist. He was chasing gold. Many people imagine Columbus as a curious explorer or a man of science, bravely sailing into the unknown to expand human knowledge. But that's just a myth. Columbus wasn't looking to study new cultures or chart the globe. He was looking for treasure. In 15th century Europe, especially in Spain, gold was everything. It meant power, status, and control, and Columbus knew that very well. In fact, in his promises to Queen Isabella, he boldly claimed, "I will find unlimited gold in these lands and bring back precious stones, spices, and even slaves." When he arrived in the Bahamas, his first question wasn't about geography or the people. It was simple. Is there gold nearby? He didn't see the native people with respect or curiosity. He saw them as guides to gold. In his writings, he described them as submissive, easily governed, and quick to share information. This mindset laid the foundation for what would become a brutal era of colonization and exploitation. So no, Columbus didn't sail with a heart full of wonder. He sailed with gold in his eyes. And though he changed history forever, it wasn't for the sake of knowledge. It was for wealth and power. Fact 8. He left as a hero, but returned as a tyrant. Columbus's first journey made him a legend across Europe. He discovered new lands. He'll find gold. He'll make Spain rich. The king and queen welcomed him like the founder of a glorious new empire. But behind this shining praise, a dark truth was hiding. On his second and third voyages, Columbus was no longer just an explorer. He became a ruler. He started building Spanish colonies in the Caribbean. But instead of peace and progress, he brought a brutal system. The native people were treated with shocking cruelty, forced into labor, punished if they didn't bring gold, and often killed. Columbus and his brothers ruled with an iron fist. Even the Spanish settlers couldn't take it anymore. They wrote desperate letters to Spain. "This man is not a hero. He's a cruel dictator." And the result? In 1500, royal officials arrived and arrested him. The great explorer returned to Spain not with treasures, but in chains. His fame was stained. The tale that began with glory ended in violence and betrayal. Fact 9. He found America, but someone else got the credit. Imagine this. You risk your life, cross the ocean 4 times, step onto a land no European has ever seen, and yet that land doesn't carry your name. That's exactly what happened to Columbus. The continent he reached was later named after another Italian explorer, Amerigo Vespucci. Why? Because Vespucci realized something Columbus never did. This is not Asia. This is a completely new continent. He wrote about it, and those writings spread across Europe. People slowly began to understand. Columbus hadn't reached Asia at all. Then in 1507, a German mapmaker named Martin Waldseemüller created a New World map. To honor Vespucci's discovery, he labeled the new land America. That name stuck, and Columbus, his name never made it onto the continent he unveiled. Just think, he discovered the New World, but history gave the name to someone else. All he got was a few places like Colombia, but not the glory he dreamed of. Fact 10. He died never knowing what he had found. In 1506, Columbus died a sick, poor, and forgotten man. He had stepped onto a land that would change the world forever, but he never realized what it was. To his last breath, he believed he had reached Asia. He searched for gold in what he thought were the shores of India or China. But in truth, he had landed on an entirely new continent, something no one in Europe had ever imagined. He changed the map of the world, yet left this world full of disappointment and confusion. If you, like Columbus, believe in following curiosity, not just books, then give this video a like. And don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell icon, because in the next video, we'll uncover another mystery from history.